What's up, everybody? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Lead From Here podcast. I'm Jason. Today, we're going to talk about knowing your limits. So this is going to kind of kick off a string of some burnout episodes because I think it's important to talk about burnout. I think it's crucial. Important is not even doing enough justice. Like, knowing your limits is what puts you into burnout. And knowing your limits is important because you can spend chunks of time outside your limits. You can push the boundaries as much as you want. You can do that. Maybe not as much as you want, but like you can do that off and on. Push those boundaries. Find out like, hey, can I push this further? Can I push this further? Can I push this further? It's going to be no. A lot of times you're going to get kicked back. You're going to feel a little burnt from it, a little bit, but not like burned out, just a little burnt. And ultimately, if you understand your limits, you will be able to keep yourself out of burnout. Because if you know you're outside your limits and you're there for an extended period of time, you're like, this doesn't feel right. I need to get back into my limits. So how do you know what your limits are? We've talked a little bit about this in another episode I'll link below, but ultimately that was kind of talking about personal relationships and knowing like how far you can go with certain things. This is more about how far can I push myself? And ultimately, your body knows. Your body's going to tell you. You can't live in anxiety all the time. So if you're at work and you're constantly in anxiety, you're not in a good spot. You're outside your limits, ultimately. Now, it doesn't mean you won't ever feel anxiety. You absolutely will. It just shouldn't be a core value. Like, that shouldn't be your everyday life. Like, you should have some anxiety from time to time as you're pushing through limits and you're pushing through hard things. Like, that's part of it. But knowing to pull yourself back out of it is kind of the key. So if you're going through something at work where you're working a lot, you're feeling a lot of anxiety, you're getting sick a lot, you're feeling really tired all the time, you're living outside your limits and you're heading towards burnout. All those things are very clear signs that you're on the road to burnout. So if you're feeling those things, find a way to take a break. Whether that's PTO, whether that's scaling back the meetings you're doing, the things you're involved in, all those things. It's important to know that if you keep pushing down this path and you keep living outside your limits, emotionally, you will eventually reach burnout. Emotionally, mentally, physically, you will be burned out. You will be absolutely useless to everybody, including yourself, because a burned out individual is by far the least effective resource any company, any family, any relationship can have. So don't go there. And if you're feeling like you're going there, you need to communicate that and pull back. Easier said than done. Absolutely. Like, this is not a situation where it's like super easy, because it ultimately all puts you at risk, right? If you hit burnout, you're putting yourself at risk because it's going to look like you're not doing a great job because you're burnt out. But also, if you communicate that you're burnt out, it might also not go great. So we'll talk about that in the next episode, communicating and how to get through the next, if you do get to burnout, like now what? But ultimately, the best way is prevention. You got to stay on top of your body, your emotions, your feelings, and understand that like anxiety is not a way of life. It's just not. Even if you're an anxious person, you're going to feel an uptick of anxiety if you're outside your limits. Like, even people that are like generally anxious, when you get into a situation at work where you're like, this is too much, your anxiety level is going to raise, and that's not great. So listen. When your body tells you something, listen. Find ways to change what's happening at work. It can look a lot of different ways, but ultimately it's probably time away. And that time away is going to be much shorter now if you're not burned out than it would be if you actually get to burn out. Again, we'll talk about that later episodes, but I hope this was helpful. Just remember that your body's always going to be very direct with you and let you know when you've crossed the limit. You're pushing the limit. It's okay to test yourself and push and see if you can expand, but also understand that you're going to rebound back a bit every time. Every time. Now, you may not rebound back as far. You may have stretched that boundary a little bit, but just know that it's very natural to get kicked back. And if you're not getting kicked back, be careful. If you're feeling anxiety and stress and tired and getting sick, and you're in a spot where you're outside your limits, you're on a road to burnout. And I don't want you to define that because it's hard to pull yourself out of that one. So I hope this is helpful. We'll talk again soon. Next few episodes probably on burnout and the next stages and how to deal with them and all that good stuff. So if you have more questions about burnout or you're in burnout and want to talk about it, Jason at leadfromhere.co. Yeah, that's it. Take care, everybody.